You know, they say a pessimist is a disillusioned romantic. Well, whoever said that's a fucking asshole.
Hello, as always, I am Cosmic, and today we're going to be reviewing Tom Clancy's The Division, essentially an open-world MMO third-person shooter with RPG mechanics that was developed by Ubisoft studio Ubisoft Massive, who were also responsible for the likes of Far Cry 3 and Assassin's Creed Revelations. Massive were not the only studio involved, indeed a few Ubisoft in-house studios have their fingerprints on The Division, which makes sense considering the relative ambitious scope of the title. Now, before we get into any of the mechanics of the game, I wanted to start off talking about the game's story. On the narrative side of things, the premise behind the game's story works like this. On Black Friday, a pandemic sweeps through New York City, and one by one, everything goes to hell. As part of The Division, a secret government agency trained to save society in an emergency, you are activated. Now, I'm certainly glad that there's no zombie apocalypse bull going on here, and there isn't hordes of undead walking the streets of New York, which has become very cliche in post-apocalypse video games by now. While the story piques a certain interest with secret government agencies, pandemics, conspiracies, corporate influence, yada yada yada, it doesn't really have anything that really locks you into the world. Most of the game's story outside the main missions and cutscenes is told via collectibles, such as the echoes where you can witness events that took place. The echo system is very similar to the detective reconstruction mode in Batman Arkham Origins. Ultimately, the quality of the story and subsequent storytelling is okay. It does the job that it's supposed to, essentially, which is to give a reason for your actions and the events taking place in the game, but it isn't something that the game should solely be bought for. If you're looking for a game that has a really in-depth, narratively rich story, then you won't get that here. That's not to say that the game story is bad, because it isn't. There's just nothing original in there in its content, or there's nothing innovative in the way that it's told. It's very bog standard, and it's all been done before. One of the things that lends itself well to help the story is the atmosphere created by the world itself. Both the graphical fidelity with all the great assets, weather changes and various visual effects, and the quality of the audio, both in terms of sound and musical score, are completely on point. From a technical standpoint, the game is very impressive, and while there are certainly plenty of bugs, as there always is in open world games, the game runs very smoothly, which is pretty rare for a Ubisoft game, especially at launch. So when you start the game, you have to create a character. Character creation in the game is a huge disappointment. When playing the beta, the character creator was very limited, and it said that there would be more options in launch. By more options, Ubisoft clearly meant have a couple of more hairstyles, some facial scars, tattoos, and one or two more face types. It's sad that there are so few options in the creator, especially for a multiplayer-focused game. The sheer amount of gear in the game will have you looking slightly different from one another, but the fact still remains that the majority of players will look like they've either been mass-produced in a clone facility or all share a common ancestor. The PC controls for mouse and keyboard do work well, however, due to the game being clearly designed for controllers, which becomes very apparent when you get into the cover system and the menu systems, I played the game with a gamepad, which was an enjoyable experience. I found that when tackling the group PvE missions and the single-player content, a gamepad offered more advantages than it did disadvantages in terms of a enjoyable, pleasurable sit back in your chair and enjoy the ride experience. When facing down other agents though in the PvP content, the quick aiming the mouse allows does give one a slight edge when trying to get good headshots in. So before I talk about the progression systems and the main content of the game, I felt it was important to start off with combat, because it's important to know what the Division is and what it isn't when the combat is concerned. The game is essentially a cover-based third-person shooter that focuses around skill and statistics. The stats from your gear and various talents and abilities will determine how effective you are regardless of your skill level. That being said, skill is also a very big factor, as is ultimately skill that will be the determining factor in your success against both human and AI opponents. It's also an RPG shooter, meaning that when you shoot something, lovely coloured numbers appear. What it is not, however, is a twitch shooter. Headshots are not going to insta-kill an enemy, and every single enemy, human or otherwise, will be a bullet sponge of some sort. Headshots are going to do more damage and get you more critical hits, giving you lovely red and yellow big coloured numbers. But just because a guy is in jeans and t-shirt doesn't mean that you won't have to plough him full of a clip of ammo before he goes down. It's fair to say that before you even consider buying and getting into the Division, you need to decide if you like bullet sponge mechanics or not, as combat is the main focus of everything in this game. If you like MMORPGs or you like games like Borderlands, then you're probably going to enjoy the game's combat. However, if you're looking for a Rainbow Six Siege type experience, it isn't going to be found here. Enemies in the game are tough, and there's many different types, ranging from baseball bat wielding looters to flame-throwing hazmat nutjobs. The difficulty in the game has been bumped up a notch since the beta, especially in the Dark Zone areas. Attempting hard difficulty missions with other players is fun, challenging, and you can quickly go from a well-executed assault to running and rolling for your life in a panic, yelling at your squad mates to save you from the giant, heavily armoured machine gun guy spewing 200 rounds per minute. Because of the stat-based nature of the combat, it means that the larger battles versus the AI, especially in the harder difficulty missions, is going to turn the game into a game of positioning and resource management. Effectively flanking the enemies, moving from cover to cover, staying out of fire, using grenades and deployables at the right time, making your shots count are all important, because the enemies are bullet sponges and the tougher enemies will take a ton, and I'm talking about a ton of damage. Firefights are going to be elongated, meaning that tactics and good positioning are often the keys to victory. I feel that the Division's combat is ultimately something that you're going to either love or you're going to hate. I myself like it. I like that my damage is based on both my stats of my equipment and can be affected by what I'm aiming at. I like that the game allows me to shoot a flamethrower's gas tank to make him a human explosive, or I can shoot a grenadier's bag to blow him up. It's certainly not going to be for everyone, and it does sometimes feel strange having to unload an entire assault rifle's ammo supply into an enemy that is dressed for a hockey match, only to have taken 2 armor bars down. That being said, however, I find the combat not only to be mechanically solid, but to also have the good fun factor and remain engaging. It never really gets boring at any point, and there are some really tense and fun moments. So now let's talk about progression, because you can't have an RPG mechanics and loot system without some decent progression. I was pleasantly surprised with the Division's progression system and how customizable it actually was. Your character has several abilities to choose from 3 tier trees, representing 3 sections of your home base. Abilities are unlocked by upgrading these facilities. Then there's also talents that you can equip a limited number of talents, each doing a variety of different things that will affect combat in some way. For example, there's a talent that allows you, once you've suppressed an enemy, you will get a bonus headshot damage for 10 seconds. Talent slots are unlocked as you progress in level, and it's often best to equip talents that will support your style of play and also your weapon choice. Finally, there are perks, which are passive bonuses that focus on upgrading things like your inventory, such as the amount of medkits that you can carry, or your filter level, which is required for going into contaminated areas. When it comes down to it, however, the loot that you acquire and your gear will be the main deciding factor in how everything affects your main stats. Characters have 3 main stats: firearms, support, and electronics. Firearms affect your damage dealing capabilities, support is essentially your health, and electronics will affect how powerful your abilities are. Each piece of gear will have a value for one or more of these stats. Gear can also have several other stat effects such as burn resistance, increased damage, etc, etc. On top of this, weapons will have their own talents such as the brutal talent, which increases headshot damage by 10% with that weapon. All this together makes the loot progression system pretty in-depth, and changing out your gear becomes an investigation of trial and error, and just because it looks better at first glance doesn't mean that it actually will be. For example, take 2 sniper rifles. One that you've just looted may look better in terms of the firearms rating, thus the preview shows your DPS going up. However, what it doesn't have is the brutal talent and the various stat bonuses that your current one has, meaning that changing the weapon could be a negative thing when your playstyle is a headhunting sniper that always goes for the headshot. And thus changing the actual rifle could be a step in the wrong direction, and it might be worth waiting for a different sniper rifle. I have to say that I really enjoy the sheer amount of loot available in the game, as well as the cosmetic gear too. Weapons are also modifiable, allowing you to place an array of attachments that will further increase and change your weapon's statistical value. The game also allows you to craft your own items once you have the required recipe, and crafting is very basic, it's very easy, and it's more of a test in patience in having to run around New York collecting the resources and then heading back to your base to craft the desired item. So let's talk about the actual meat of the content, which are the missions. Now, if you're looking for a good single player experience, then don't come to the Division for it. While the main missions can be done solo on normal mode, and some early ones can even be soloed on hard if you're skillful enough, the actual fun factor of the game is in the form of multiplayer. Doing hard missions with a group is not only a much more well-rounded and fun experience, but it gets you better rewards straight off the bat. Forgetting the main missions for just a moment, I want to mention the secondary content. Now, this comes in the form of the side quests and encounters. Each section of Manhattan is level divided, and within each zone are safe houses. Now, from this safe house, you will get the location of the various side quests and encounters for that area. Encounters are basically where you can obtain resource points to upgrade your base facilities, and they are pretty small missions that often have you defending a location for a minute or two. They're very quick and they're very simple. Side missions are used instead for having a little extra story, as well as a way of grinding experience points to level up. Now, here's my problem with both. Both the encounters and the side missions do not have enough variety. They reuse the same 4 or 5 missions over and over and over again, just changing a few names here and there. And this gets really repetitive really quickly. It's very grindy. A lot of the single player content solely focuses around building up your base of operations, which once you've upgraded a facility in one of the wings, it will actually cosmetically change, and things will it almost gives the illusion that you're making an actual change in the world around you, and it's a good way to tie you down and get you really invested into the game. Because the upgrading of your facilities is locked into and tied into the progression of your character in terms of abilities, talents and perks, the game almost forces you to run encounters and go on side missions to level up so that you can do the main missions too. I feel that if you're looking for a single player experience, it isn't really here. It is much more fun to wander around New York with a group of friends or do the hard missions with a pickup group. This is where the fun resides. If you want to go around New York by yourself, then I would go find another game, because there's not that much to do. It's very repetitive, and the actual fun of the game comes in the form of, facing down bosses on hard mission difficulty, with a bunch of other players, and there's not that much fun to be had in running around an empty New York, looking for hostages to save from looters. When it comes to the multiplayer side of things, I actually found this to be a very enjoyable experience. The matchmaking system is simple, it's easy to use, it also bugs quite regularly, and when you actually join someone else's session, you can be placed anywhere, which is really strange, but hopefully they'll fix that quite soon. Doing the main missions with a group of players on hard difficulty is a really fun experience. The later missions in the game are very, very challenging. There is some great boss battles and great moments in there. I really like the level design, how you can have a hard mission that is in a really open area, but then you can also have one that's in a police station and it's all corridors and computer rooms, and it's really, the locations really do vary, and that in turn creates a unique and enjoyable experience each time. For me, I really enjoyed the PvE side. I can imagine that for some people it will feel very boring and very grindy. It is very similar to a lot of MMO content in that regard, and I think that if you enjoy PvE in MMOs, you'll probably enjoy PvE in The Division, because it's about learning tactics, finding ways to take down your enemy and ultimately surviving the end boss fight. The dead zone areas, however, are where the core of the multiplayer player versus player content comes into focus, and it's ultimately where the best gear in the game can be found. I really enjoyed the dead zone. I thought that it was going to be an absolute cluster when the game was first announced. Beta did prove me right and wrong in some respects. It's ultimately an opportunist's wet dream when it comes down to it, being able to basically stab anyone in the back, which I myself have done a couple of times when I felt it was appropriate. I don't do it all the time, but I do it some of the time if I need to. And I really like the dead zone areas. The dead zone areas, similar to the rest of Manhattan, are level sectioned. There is a lot of cool stuff in the dead zones. Most of the actual cool moments come in the form of the player versus player interactions rather than interactions with the AI or the content itself. And I have to say that the enemies in the dead zone have been hugely beefed up since the beta. They were far too squishy in the beta, and this time they do pack a punch. And for me, the dead zone represents an interesting zone that is completely optional in some regard, and it does provide an enjoyable, tense experience. Wondering if the person that you were working with 5 seconds ago is going to shoot you as soon as you get that piece of epic gear. I think ultimately The Division is a really good game. There's nothing innovative in it at all, but what it takes a lot of things that have been done before, puts them into one package and executes it very, very well. I think that in its current form and its current content, there is a lot of content there. There's 30 plus hours worth of content there. What will be interesting to see is where they go from here, where Ubisoft decide to take the game, because while the game is a lot of fun and I really enjoyed my time with it, I still feel that it is lacking something. It is lacking something spectacular. I enjoyed the game throughout, and there was, apart from the repetitive side quests and stuff like that, I felt that I have an overall good experience, but there was nothing that was stand out. There was not one moment in The Division where I went, wow, that was really, really impressive. There was never that moment. All the hard missions and the dead zone area is all designed really well, and it's all really fun to play, but there was never a really standout achievement in there. However, it executes what it wants to do really well, and very few games can actually say that. Even fewer Ubisoft games can say that, and I'm actually impressed that I've played a Ubisoft game on launch and don't hate it with every fibre in my being. I really hope that Ubisoft continue to work on The Division, and in the upcoming expansions really put in some unique, fun content for players, because I think that's what this game needs. It just needs a little bit of magic and it will become something that's really memorable. However, If you're looking for Destiny on PC, this is it, and ultimately that's what the game was intended to be. So that's my review of Tom Clancy's The Division. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, please do like, subscribe and leave a comment, and I will see you next time.